I think that there are problems emerging around the world at the moment, and especially in Western societies, that cannot be solved by ideas just from the left or just from the right. The first little bit of introduction I'm going to give is from a book that Ken Wilber cites to give some insight about how does human consciousness actually emerge. He uses a book called Zen at War. This book details the collusion between some Japanese Zen priests in the invasion of China during the Second World War. The action of these priests will be described today certainly as nationalistic and probably quite racist. These priests were very advanced meditation practitioners. How do those two things sit together? It was quite a spiritual conundrum. The solution came when the realization arrived that spiritual development has two distinct streams, one of growing up and one of waking up. The waking up stream is the development of states of consciousness and often comes with practices from the East. So with lots of meditation, hopefully, we can get out of our gross waking state into, say, witnessing state, and hopefully, if we're very lucky, get into some non-duality. But this also runs alongside the development of stages of consciousness, and this was discovered by Western psychologists. And they found out that human beings always have a perceptual filter, almost like a goldfish bowl, I think of it, as going around their heads, which is perceiving reality, and it's providing filters onto their reality. These things are when you start to learn about them, become very, very clear when they're in play. One of the interesting parts of these stages of development is that these people doing a lot of meditation, even in deep states of meditation, these stages of consciousness cannot be perceived because they're being seen through rather than being seen at. They are the very water that we're swimming in. So let's look at Professor Graves' model. He published research that showed that human consciousness develops in relationship with life conditions, with nature, if you like. What he shows was, say, for example, 100,000 years ago, that life conditions gave us a set of problems, A. Those set of problems meant that human beings had to develop a set of ideas, N, a mental model, to solve those problems. Now, over time, this model, N, these set of ideas, without changing the set of ideas, is operating on its environment. As it's operating on its environment, it's literally changing its own life conditions. And over time, those same ideas will start to manifest a new set of more complex problems. Problems B, purple. And that will ensure that consciousness, again, has to emerge to a new level to meet those conditions. The old sets of ideas don't go away, they don't disappear, but they do get transformed by the new set of ideas. So let's have a look at these levels in a bit more detail. So 100,000 years ago, we've got what's termed the beige level. It's very instinctive. Humans at this level, we've just come out of being primates. And it's just, there's no real sense of self at all at this stage. It's just responding to tension in the body. So traveling around often in herds of, say, about 10 to 15, but it's still being very individualistic within those herds. This is not a group stage as yet. And so it feels hunger, it feels the tension of hunger, so I go and gather fruits and berries from the forest. I feel the tension of being cold, so I go and find a cave to take some shelter in. And still acting very individually, it means that there's still life conditions happening to it that are very risky. So there's animals out there that are dangerous to me as an individual. There's a lack of access to sex, for the tension of sex, and for reproduction of the species as well. So these sort of drives in the life conditions, about 50,000 years ago, we see the evidence of the first tribes coming together for safety and security. And notice we've gone from an individual level to one which is much more about group cohesion and focus on this needs of safety and security. At beige, there was no real sense of spirituality at all. Purple, it really emerges massively. And it emerges in a way that everything has spirits. The stones have spirits, the trees have spirits, and they all must be honored. They must be placated to make sure that our food supply comes in. This level is intensely superstitious. When this kind of goes forward and the rituals are taking place, the rituals are being run by the elders make sure that these are maintained. Again, going over time, people start to lose, well, why was that original, why was this ritual created? We can't actually really realize the root. And when we start to get situations in the tribe that food is threatened, maybe there's been a flood or a drought, and the elders are saying, more ritual, more ritual. The young people in that tribe are saying, the more ritual isn't doing it. I need to self-express. There's another way of going here. We can go to that tribe down the river and we can take their food. And so we get the emergence of the next level of human consciousness, the red power level, all about action and will. This is the full birth of the egocentric self. And this is a very bloody era in humanity. And as this level emerges, the people are stepping out of the safety and security of the tribe. The world looks a very, very hostile place. But the more willpower that they give to it, this is a world of winners and losers. So I'm going to step forward here and take what I want, and I live for today in this level. There's no long-term planning here. It's all about reward now. And so this continues on. You can see this in human history, and you can still see it around today, of course. This level's still in place. We have things like Attila the Hun. And of course, it does bring more people together. Each one of these levels does actually bring more wholeness. This brings more into bigger tribes together. The first cities start to emerge too. But again, the people leading it, it gets very bloody. And as the bloodiness comes closer and closer to them, they start to realize, actually, to control greater numbers of people, we need really strong rules, and they need to be imposed very powerfully. And that's when we get the emergence, about 5,000 years ago, of the first blue level. So again, we've gone from intensely individualistic back to a group consciousness. And this really happened, first of all, with the Egyptians. And it's very interesting that the Egyptians built the pyramids. And of course, this level creates that pyramidical structure. It starts to understand that one of the weaknesses of red is the success of red is only related to the effective lifespan of that charismatic leader. Whereas blue suddenly realized, actually, if you create a pyramidical structure and you have these elite families in the top, and you create lines whereby everyone's got someone ready to replace them, you can suddenly start to create much longer-term projects. And so blue is much more long-term thinking. And again, we see we've just been having a presentation that mentioned this religious level, still very prevalent in society. And at this level as well, there's a huge breakthrough internally with human beings. Professor Robert Keane is saying that consciousness happens pictorially at the center of our being. And as we develop as human beings, it's about taking greater and greater developmental spaces so that we can take more and more perspectives on things. At blue is the first breakthrough into 2 developmental spaces internally. With that, it brings the capacity to actually love somebody else, and it also brings the capacity for guilt. Because we can literally put ourselves pictorially into somebody else's shoes. This breakthrough comes forward as well, and the shadow side of it starts to manifest as this structure and order is imposed. And what you get towards the end of it is male-dominated hierarchical power structures as well. And if you're a peasant in a blue society and you've got loads of talent, you're going to stay a peasant. There's not much. This pyramid is very, very rigid. And so frustration builds up in these societies, and there starts to be breakthroughs People like Copernicus start to question, oh, is the Earth at the center of this solar system, or is it the sun? And these breakthroughs start to come forward, and the scientific method of finding truth starts to come forward. The truth before at that religious level is very absolutistic. It's all about the book, about the one true way. The one true way, the religious level, comes out of that bloody level, and it creates a lot of peace through these rules. But it suddenly comes up against other groups that say, we've got the one true way as well. And of course, there can't be two true ways. So you also start to get a lot of warfare between much bigger groups at this point as well. And again, you can see this identity. This is all about identifying with my group. There's still slavery at this level as well. So that if you're not identified with my chosen group, if you've got a different way, I can literally treat you like an animal. You just don't mean anything to me. And so this coming forward in terms of another developmental space opening up with the finding of truth with science and rationality starts to break through with the European Enlightenment, starts to catch up with the Industrial Revolution, and this orange machine starts to emerge, the orange level of consciousness, all about rationality, achievement. And this starts to go around the world, and it's using up resources wherever it goes, and it actually does provide a lot of wealth. And of course, scientific truth does also provide, it overcomes a lot of the negative sides of the previous religious systems. In all Western countries around the world that started to break through to orange consciousness, within 100 years, all of them banned slavery. It's a massive step through in terms of humanity's journey. Of course, this orange system provides healthcare, innovation, lifespan of human beings really extends. We have a lot more education as well, again, based on more rationality. But towards the end of that, of course, as it goes round, using up resources, and also using its education to just go into other systems around the world and take their resources without worrying about them too much, because it's all just about achievement. It starts to have a shadow that starts to come through in the end of the 50s and the 1960s, where there's people saying, actually, there's huge group, there's a very successful mainstream group here, but there's huge groups getting marginalized in this process, and you know what? Their truth is valuable too. So we start to get the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement as well, and the green worldview starts to come through. And there's a new sense of truth as well, which again brings greater sense of inclusion, where truth is given at green as being pluralistic. So it's saying all truth is related to context. So you all have your lives, I've got my life, and therefore our experiences that we've had means that we perceive things differently. This is what the green truth is saying. So it's saying, you've got your truth and I've got mine. So that's a quick run through of the tiers as they've emerged up to date. And I hope you're wondering, well, how do we get to this yellow system above? I also hope that you're noticing that these sets of ideas come, and the ideas stay the same, but they're operating on their life conditions, and they change their own life conditions to create the friction, the dissonance for their own next transformation. And that's where I think we're at the moment, particularly in the Western world. So a little bit more detail about how that transformation actually occurs. Professor Robert Keegan from Harvard has spent 30 years researching how does transformation occur. And he came up with something called subject-object theory. He's saying that these lenses of perception are so close to us, as I say, we're seeing through them all the time rather than seeing at them. And when we go through a transformation, he says the dissonance, the shadow side, becoming aware of the shadow side, pulls this lens of perception out into awareness eventually, and it moves from subject to being object. And that is the transformation. That's when we have this visceral experience of transformation. The point with it is that you can literally see it. So before, what we've chatted about this evening, if I was to say to you, What's the shadow side of that religious mindset? A lot of people would have come up with something similar to, male-dominated, hierarchical power structures. And if I was, you can literally see it. If I was to say to you, what's the shadow side of that business mindset? And you might come up with, greed, bad redistribution of wealth, environmental destruction. You can literally see it because those ideas have been pulled out there. But what's the shadow of green? So let's look at the sense of truth again. So all truth is dependent on context. All truth is relative. You have your truth, and I have mine. Can you see how this has great power to include people, to bring people together, to be non-judgmental? First-tier levels all exclude each other very powerfully. They're not aware that they're part of the same developmental pathway with each other. And you can see in the Western world the main levels at play, blue, orange, and green, with the big populations, the big votes at blue and orange. And these worldviews are like oil and water. If you put them in a room with each other, they'll separate themselves out quite quickly. They don't like each other. And unfortunately, the most exclusive of those is green. We all live in this Findhorn area, and we've got a lot of people coming here to experience the community. And people turn up, and we don't mind about what skin colour they are. We don't mind about their sexual orientation. There's even a few wizards I've seen turn up here, and they're welcome too. Everybody's really welcome, as long as you're green. In terms of worldviews, it's not very diverse at all, and it's very exclusive. And what it gives is this bit of a broken leading edge at the moment. And this blue level is absolutely crucial. Politicians all know about this spiral dynamics, these lenses in play. You can hear it in them when they're talking on the television. If they wanted to get this blue vote, they'd be talking about things, this kind of religious, right or wrong, everything's black and white kind of mindset. It'd be talking about things like strong and stable or building a wall. They know that this blue level is up for grabs. And what I want to cover tonight is about the inclusion of green. Because in the 1960s, the life conditions, there was an enormous amount of exclusion. There was really serious problems, a lot of which are still around today. And green, quite rightly, went about and started to solve those problems and help out marginalised groups and provide conditions to help bring them along. Now, of course, since the financial crash has taken place, there's actually a lot of people in society as a whole now, a lot of people still at these red and blue life condition levels, not a very pleasant place to be. Now, there's a lot of people saying, we could actually do with a bit of that help from these charities and stuff like that. And actually, green, because it doesn't quite like their value systems, it doesn't like those people. It might say, well, actually, you're not the right type to receive that support. And those people might go, but those people over there are getting it. What about me? What's wrong with me? And what happens over time, and this continues over time, is that group of people starts to say, you know what, that cosmopolitan elite up there, they don't care about me. I'm not on their books. They seem to look after this group, but they don't look after me. And that group starts to say, I will follow anyone who stands up for my voice, who starts to say, they'll represent me. And so you start to get this real polarisation in politics. And so these levels go out to the side. And of course, green is absolutely appalled at the politics going on without taking any real responsibility of its own role in that dynamic. It's the dynamics that are important, how these movements occur. It's not about getting rid of inclusion, stopping helping people who have been having tough times. What it is about for me is about really deepening our concept of inclusion. all these people, they need love as well. It's not just some groups, it's other groups too. And if they keep on having their voices slapped down, say, oh no, you can't say that, or we don't like how you go about things and stuff like that, they're just going to go further the other way. They need to be included, they need to be heard, they need to be listened to as well. Another shadow of the green worldview is that it runs out of money in the end. It's one of the big factors that actually kicks it into really wanting to actually transform. So green has to have come out of the shadow of orange. It's got to have experienced that to kind of transform to green. And of course, I know from my own process going through it and give my family a really hard time of kind of looking at it, going, it's terrible, look what you're doing to the environment, can't you see? And of course, they couldn't see, they literally can't, But so green rejects that orange level, the values of that orange level, and yet tends to run on money created at that orange level. It's not very good. In fact, it's quite hopeless at creating its own money. Yeah, it's not really what it's about. So it runs out of money in the end. The final one here about the shadow of green is about the republic of feelings. And if you see here, with these levels, there's an emergence of truth, each one bringing greater and greater wholeness. So at that blue level, all truth is absolutistic. It's in the book. Follow this book and follow it to the letter. Otherwise, we might kill you. What emerges from that is all truth is rational. We get the scientific method overcomes it, more powerful. And then we get all truth is relative. Now, because these levels, these first tier levels separate out, they don't integrate each other, you get this all truth is relative. And that means that there is no absolute truth. If there's no absolute truth, the only truth I've got is my feelings. And I'm going to follow my feelings, and they become very sacred, my feelings. And what that does, if you've only got your own feelings to guide you and nothing else, it opens up the doorway for what Ken Wilber calls the tag team from hell, nihilism and narcissism. So the integration needs to come between these other senses of truth as well, and recognizing that there is some absolute truths too. So as we get up to yellow is the experiential realization that these other levels, first of all, knowing about the shadow of green, let's say that this dissonance, really focusing on these shadow aspects, just creates a great deal of cognitive dissonance. So it starts to empower this subject-object move to bring the old worldview out to be seen. And at yellow, there's also this realization that the other levels, each level has got a partial truth, that needs integrating. Each one's got a partial truth. It's got a good bit. In fact, usually it's got lots of gifts, and it's got a little bit of shadow aspect as well. So this movement to yellow is all about discernment. It's about looking down at the level, saying, yeah, that bit's good. I clearly need to earn money. But it harnesses all those lower pieces, not for their own purpose. It's very much focused on putting in the health of the spiral pathway, of serving humanity, of serving that spiral journey for others. So it needs to make money in order to go out there to help other people, to have enough money to actually be able to help other people. It needs to have enough internal structure at blue to hold down, make sure red stays under control. It needs to engage its own will, to have enough will to power through green, have strong families and eat the right food at beige. And yet yellow has massively more problem-solving capacity. Claire Graves did research into the problem-solving of people at yellow and people at the first-tier value systems of red and above. And the yellow value system has more problem-solving capacity than all the others put together. And when they studied how they go about problems, they found out that they had a massive reduction of fear. He says their IQ level was quite similar. But he says when they put them into rooms simply with the same complex problems, it says when they went into the first-tier thinkers kept on coming up with things that didn't work, but were coming back to the same underlying structure. And he says the people at second tier were going in there, it didn't work with that one structure, and they did away with the whole structure, started something completely new. And when they started interviewing them, they said, well, that's how you learn. You need to kind of invest in your own failure, because that's what helps you grow. So I'm hoping that, that this movement to yellow also brings, with the awareness of these lower value systems, allows allows the full health of the spiral. It actually does have the capacity to create world peace, which actually green really wants to do, but it can't, because it can't interact with these lower levels. It tends to reject them too much. And I'll finish off with a quote from Don Beck, and he says, people around the world are not at war with each other. Worldviews are at war with each other. And yellow is the first one that is truly abundant. Thank you.